Joining us here on the show is one of the veteran voices of college football. Always wonderful to get his insight on things. Commentator and play-by-play voice for Fox Sports, our friend Tim Brando, dropping on by Sunday Morning Football. Tim, good morning.
Same to you, D.A., and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you as well. Are you satisfied with getting Alabama-Clemson again or dissatisfied?
No, I think they're the two best teams. So you have to be satisfied that Clemson and Alabama are there, but I'm dissatisfied that I can predict it every year. I'm dissatisfied that only 4 teams get to go and that the same 4 are seemingly going every year, turning college football into the NBA, where I can tell you back in July and August who the teams are going to be because the pure playoff privilege and brand names are the only ones invited to this party is a downer. It's not good for the game. I think you know me well enough to understand how much I love the game, and we're not being progressive enough with college football. I think the BCS was actually, because of its criteria and because of the computers that were put in place, I think it was much more inclusionary than the exclusionary college football playoff. 13 people that are deciding based on name recognition and brand and history completely rules out any chance of having upstart teams, and you'll see it this weekend. And by the way, when LSU and UCF play in the desert, it'll be nothing more than a glorified exhibition. And if UCF happens to win, we'll be talking, the built-in excuses are already there. The game was early. It was in the desert. LSU didn't have Greedy Williams. They didn't have Fulton. They all opted out for the NFL combines and so on and so forth. And so credit will not be given to that team because they're not one of the pure playoff privileged. And that's a real problem. And I think what happened yesterday was actually great for those of us that really are pounding the drum for expansion. I think this really helps that cause. The ratings on those games yesterday will not grow from where they were a year ago. My friends at ESPN, and they don't need my defense, but they're not getting the bang for the buck that they're putting out for this. We were told by now, DA, that we would start seeing ratings that would rival AFC and NFC championship game ratings, and we're not seeing that. I don't think anyone west of the Mississippi cares to see Alabama and Clemson. And I think all of the Big Ten homes, which are saturated with more than any other corridor of the country when it comes to college football, have not been engaged for each of the last 2 years and haven't had their champion involved in 3 straight seasons of this process. So, yeah, I think that it's disappointing that we have such a downer with regard to this sort of invitational approach that we have that leaves out so many. Notre Dame was a team that I could tell you right away had no chance, even though they were undefeated. And they don't need a 13th data point, apparently. I do recall when TCU needed that 13th data point, it was used to keep them out in 2014. TCU is not one of the pure playoff privileged. Oklahoma is. So, we keep having the same teams every year, and I think when it becomes predictable in a sport that's got so much parity as college football does, that's a shame.
Tim Brando joins us this morning here on Sunday Morning Football on CBS Sports Radio. So what's your best case scenario? What's your best solution? Is it to expand to 6? Is it to expand to 8? How would you do it?
I think it's going to go to 8. I think when you start seeing the comments from Nicole Auerbach's article last week and Jim Delaney's being quoted, as well as Barry Alvarez and other commissioners are certainly influenced by what Jim Delaney has to say. I think there's going to be a long look in the aftermath of this championship. And I think it'll probably happen, DA, after the 2019 season ends. Contractually, every 3 years, they can look at the process and determine if they want to tweak it. I think they have to go to 8. And I think the reason they do is because I'm not alone in believing that we've got a problem here without having so many of the teams within the consortium. And, I don't think necessarily UCF is the driving force here, although I think their story helps. To win 26 consecutive games, whatever the number is pretty amazing. But when you have the Big Ten left out, and Jim Delaney is a pretty powerful guy, and you have them left out for 2 straight years, that's a problem. And I believe that when you look at other conferences that are being left out because Notre Dame gets in and they have a seat at the table and they're really not that good, the teams they played were representative, and you can't argue with having USC and Stanford on the schedule, but neither one of those teams were as good as they once were. And I think we found out that Notre Dame is not ready for prime time when it comes to the playoffs. But they got in because they're Notre Dame. So I think all of this comes into play without question. And because of the scheduling inequities, and I think that's too much to overcome, the fact that the ACC and the SEC are playing 8 conference games, the Pac-12, Big 12, and Big 10 are playing 9, you've got – and that would take 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 years to repair, to have those scheduling inequities taken care of. So the easiest way to deal with this is to expand to 8. And you don't have to have necessarily conference champions, but you have to have conference representatives. You know, the pushback on that is always, well, what if Northwestern would have won? What if Pitt would have won the ACC? And you got a 4 or 5 loss team because of the divisional breakdowns. Well, you put in your criteria that if you have 3 or more losses, then you are subject to be not in it, that the conference can pick its own representative to be a part of it, so that you save yourself the so-called embarrassment of having a 4 or 5 loss team. Everyone's trying to dodge this notion of the college game becoming like the NFL. No one's suggesting that we go to 16 or 32. But if you had 8 involved, and imagine this, DA, if we had on campus, all right, 2 Saturdays ago, if we had 1 versus 8, okay, that's in Tuscaloosa. You got Washington playing against Alabama. 2 versus 7, you got Clemson playing against UCF. Who wouldn't want to watch that? 3 versus 6, you got Notre Dame and Ohio State. Who wouldn't want to watch that? And 4 versus 5, a shootout between Oklahoma and Georgia. Why wouldn't you want that? If you don't want to watch that, then you don't like college football. That would have been wonderful. And you play the game on the campuses where the higher-ranked teams are located. And then you fast forward, you eliminate 1 week of just losing college football to the NFL on Saturdays, and then 2 weeks later, bingo, you're playing your Final Four just as you do now. And it doesn't add more than 1 game for 2 teams. That's all. 1 additional game for the 2 teams that make it to the championship. And I dare say they wouldn't mind playing that 1 extra game if it was for everything.
Tim Brando joins us breaking down the college football playoff structure into a national championship game. Do you give Clemson a shot at knocking off Alabama?
Yeah, they have a puncher's chance. They do. The biggest problem they have is that you got a freshman quarterback. Now, I know Trevor Lawrence is incredible. And when they brought him in and they made the decision to replace Kelly Bryant, it was with Alabama in mind. He's got a big arm. He is a can't-miss top pick, more than likely the number 1 pick in a couple of years in the NFL draft. But this is new for Clemson in this scenario. You know, Bryant had been primed as a backup to Deshaun Watson to play in the game, and it didn't work out in the semifinals last year. And Deshaun Watson had 2 great chances at victory and pulled out 1. But to go into a game against Nick Saban with a freshman quarterback on that stage, with all that he does with his secondary to disguise coverages, you probably saw last night how many times up against the clock Kyler Murray was. And Kyler, by the way, played a brilliant game just to keep his team in it, particularly in the second half. It's hard. It's hard for someone that's as accomplished as Kyler. I think Trevor will have additional issues. Plus, he's not obviously the runner that Murray is, but his arm is outstanding. Now, their wide receivers are really good. Clemson's wide receivers are a great strength, and I think Travis Etienne, as a running back, has got to be effective running the football for Clemson to have a chance. The Tigers will give Alabama the best shot. These are the best 2 teams, but once again, I just don't think America is that revved up to see Chapter 4 of Clemson and Alabama.
I think that's fair. Before I let you go, do you think Georgia would have given us a better game instead of either what we saw from Oklahoma or Notre Dame last night?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the premier problem. If somebody says, oh, you just want to give everybody a participation trophy, Brando, that is a crock. Georgia, they told us at the very beginning, and Mike Slive, God rest his soul, with the SEC, he pushed for this. You know, he wanted this more than any other commissioner. He wanted this to go to 4, but he was big on saying conference champions. That's not the way to go. We need the 4 best teams, 4 best. Okay, that is what the committee is entrusted to do. They did not do that. And don't tell me, well, they lost 2 games, therefore they. Oh, by the way, they should have thought about that when they played at LSU. It's college football. There's a lot of parity in college football today. It's hard to go on the road and always win. A team with 2 losses can be better than a team with 1 loss. All you have to do is look at the schedule, see who they played, and how tough it was to get there. They proved for 3.5 quarters that they should have They were number 4 when they played Alabama, correct?
Yep.
They were number 4. For 3.5 quarters, they were the better team, and yet they dropped from 4 to 5. But please, no, Georgia, had Alabama lost to Georgia, DA, do you think for 1 minute they would have been left out of the college football playoff?
Nope, not for 1 minute.
Not for 1 second. No, Alabama is the highest form of pure playoff privilege is that they always get the opportunity at a second chance. They did in 2011 in that debacle that led us to the BCS rematch between LSU and Alabama and got us to 4. And they were telling us all the time, well, we can't have a playoff. They even had a website that Ari Fleischer put together for the BCS to tell us why we can't have a playoff in college football. Because Alabama is Alabama, they got in. Well, I guarantee you Alabama would have been in and Georgia would have been in, and there would have been 3, not just 2, but 3 conferences within the consortium that would have been left out. So, the level of hypocrisy that's at work in this process is the issue. It's not about the 2 teams or how we get – it's how we get to the 2 teams that's the issue, and the fact that most of the country is not engaged. If you engage the rest of the country, then more people are going to care. We need to bring more people to the college game. Bring fans in the Northeast, the Midwest, and the Far West that aren't engaged with college football. And that's what we have in mind, and that's what this is supposed to be about, and it's not been done with this fundamentally flawed process with the committee, this beauty pageant that's taking place with nebulous criteria and zero transparency.
Not only can a 2-loss team be better than a 1-loss team, a 2-loss team in Georgia can be better than a 0-loss team in Notre Dame, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you tell me that you got the 4 best teams, you're lying. And, anybody that knows college football knows that those were not the 4 best teams. And you can quarrel with, which one should have been out. Well, Notre Dame had to be in under any other. I've heard this one. Under any circumstances, Notre Dame should have been in. Well, really? Well, then tell me why. All right? Explain to me why that has to be the case when we're supposed to have people on that committee that know football. Notre Dame barely beat Vanderbilt at home. Shouldn't that count for something? Okay, let's face it. It certainly does for UCF. We're told over and over again that UCF's schedule is just too weak. Well, they can't help their schedule. Notre Dame can't help their schedule either. Well, okay, so what's the difference? All right, how do you balance that argument? The only way to balance it is by opening it up and allowing for more teams to have an opportunity. And as I said, it started with Barry Alvarez. I thought Nicole Auerbach's article in The Athletic a couple of weeks ago was really revealing. And I think that the change model is in play, and I think that it's probably going to take a couple of years for us to get there. God willing, we will by, say, 2020.
College football fans, he's a must-follow on Twitter, at Tim Brando, longtime voice of college football, Fox Sports Voice. Tim, I always love our conversations, man. Thank you so much for the time. Wonderful stuff. Convincing argument, man. I knew it would be great, and you definitely brought it today. Thanks so much.
You got it, DA. Anytime, and I'll see you on the path to hoops here.
All right.
As we get going in January.
Sounds good. You too. Tim Brando joining us this morning.